Between Christmas and Easter is roughly 4 months. And I used to say what happens is you get 5 months of expenses and about 3 months worth of income in that time. So you need to be not surprised by that and prepare appropriately for it, because it does seem to catch people unaware every year, even though it is entirely predictable. Welcome back to the Scale My Clinic podcast. And today I have Dr. Sachin Patel. Hey, Sachin.
It's very formal. Hello.
Well, I think a variety of intakes and outtakes is what people need. What we're talking about today, Sachin, is the problems at the end of the calendar year and the start of the calendar year. The 3 top mistakes that amateurs make that pros don't make. Number 1, not preloading.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's 3. 3 big errors. I think even the pros make these errors. I think we sort of can slip into these things. The first one is failing to preload the next year. Now, what that means is there are key activities that are personal and professional that our job should be to make sure that they happen the following year. And so we ran our X's through this process, but essentially, Project X members, we work through this whole process. But essentially, you've got to think of a few different things and then make sure they make their way into your calendar. The first is, what are your big freedom rocks? Like, what are the big things that are important to you in terms of freedom? And the way we like to think about that is weekly, monthly, quarterly, or term-based, if you've got school-age children, and annual. And I think what you need to think about here is this all comes from the analogy that Stephen Covey talks about, which is rocks, pebbles, sand. So essentially, I'm sure everyone's heard this a gazillion times, but I'll say it one more time. If you have a jar and you want to fit as much as possible into that jar, the analogy he gives is that you start with the biggest things, the rocks, first. In our case, these would be the most important things, both on a personal level as freedom and on a professional level as things that, have the most impact on the business, often revenue-wise. So they're the big rocks that would go in first. Then the next would be pebbles. They're your sort of usual deliverables in your business for BAU. And then the third set of things would be sand. There's professional sand, which might be CPD, conferences, those types of things, learning and development. And then personal sand, which will be all your personal things, hobbies, important dates for birthdays and anniversaries, big major events, family events, friends things, all of those things. And so you need to identify what those things are. The big personal rocks, like your big, normally around freedom, time off, and lifestyle things you want to achieve. And then alongside that, the top 1, 2, or 3 money-making activities you want to make sure happen next year. Examples may be focusing on things that move revenue in your business. It may be GP recruitment, those types of things. And then at a pebble level, there'll be the usual stuff you do day to day. Consulting might be one of those, but the other stuff is going to be around the leadership and management within the business. And so that might be, if you're involved heavily, for example, in GP retention, then it may be whatever your GP retention process is and the part you play in that, so that you diarize and make sure that happens. And then once you've identified those different bits of, different big rocks, the pebbles, the sand, and you've identified the frequency, then your job would be to transfer that into your calendar, so that it can reliably happen at a regular cadence and maximizes the chances of what you want happening. So that's your first mistake that people don't do. They often may get to the end of January and think, okay, the year started now. No, the year should have started in your head now or before now. And the big things that are going to make the biggest difference ideally are already scheduled for next year, so that when next year arrives, you're not sort of 1 month, 2 months in, then suddenly running around to try and catch up for lack of preparation. So preloaded year is the first one.
And so, Sachin, there's two things that I think I'd like to expand on in the Stephen Covey model there. Number one is the container is a fixed size. We should imagine that container is made of glass because, you obviously have the constraints of the time available in the year. The second thing that I think is important, and there are two parts to this. The first thing about this is that those rocks can be personal things. It might be fitness. It could be something spiritual for you. It could be something relationship, something that you've ignored that has previously been sand or maybe pebbles, and it should be upgraded to a rock. And it's just going to be a must do for you in the coming year. That's an important aside. And then the meta part of this, I think, is really important. And I'll give you some context. I was talking to an owner recently about joining Project X. As you know, anybody who wants to join Project X speaks to you and me, and they need to get past both of us in order to join. This person I said no to, and they were just a victim to all of the GPs in the practice. So the GPs basically ran their own lives. They didn't collaborate with anybody else, particularly the practice. And this person just felt like they're on the receiving end of everything. Bit of a victim mentality, and they were in that Cartman drama triangle. They're playing the victim role, and then they were also persecuting the people that they felt putting them in a difficult position. This process is not just for you. It's for you to run in the practice and then coach other doctors to pre-plan the year. I fundamentally don't believe people are selfish by design. It's usually just that they're living their own lives and they haven't really been asked to share that with anybody else. And so the doctors, that this weird dynamic arrives where the owners get really frustrated and feel like they're victims. And then they start to get really frustrated with the doctors that are part of the clinic, but they don't actually talk to them about it. They just kind of get angry with them and assume that they're doing this on purpose or that they don't care or that they're not interested in the well-being of the practice. You end up with a really weird dynamic. And so it's a really important thing to say, hey, all of us know that next year is coming. Let's sit together and do a little bit of planning around this. And no, this doesn't mean that people are employees. It doesn't mean that you can't talk to people about their expectations. If you were to reverse it as an owner, you're not going to say, hey, Sachin, I know it's Friday afternoon and this is next Monday, but we're shutting your room for a week because we just can't be bothered opening it. And we knew about it for a while, but luck, you can't come in and do your work. We know that would be completely unacceptable and people would be up in arms. Well, if that's happening to you in reverse as an owner, then, it is also unreasonable, but that's on you. You need to make sure that you're communicating better to make sure that you're getting the most out of your team. So doing this process for yourself can help others and then hopefully get a more aligned practice along the way. I thought that was relatively contextual, having spoken to somebody in the last week on this.
Yeah, very much so. We just literally recently ran this session with the Project X members and, they spent a good 80 minutes on this and cross-checked with each other. And many of them are now going to take a modified version of the process we ran and going to run it with their team. And so imagine that, even if you just ran it with your team to pick so that they remembered all the important dates in their lives related to birthdays, anniversaries, and other sort of milestones. And if they then were able to commit to their time off early, which is predictable time off, there's obviously unpredictable as well. Imagine how much easier that is to plan and prepare for. Just, a simple thing like that. So that is the first mistake, Todd.
Not preloading the year ahead, number one. Now, number two.
I'll queued up this time. I'm ready. Number two is calling off the hunt too soon. And so every year around this time, we can start to get a bit tired. It can feel like, bring on Christmas, bring on that time off, whatever that looks like, whether it's a couple of days or a couple of weeks or longer. It's quite easy at this time to start coasting and thinking, because we're going into holiday mode, that there's nothing that happens. And that's not the truth. There's probably 3 areas where this mistake shows up. The first one is around GP recruitment. It's certainly one of the most common times of the year where I've experienced, I think, you'll corroborate this, is the biggest amount of GP movement happens around or decisions around movement about where they're going to spend the future for their practice. And so a lot of people come to reflection at this time of year and they're deciding, maybe next year is going to be different from this year. and so they need to make some changes. And so we need to be fully in to the recruitment game at this time of year.
Now, you want to be part of somebody else's New Year's resolution, right, Sachin?
Absolutely, yeah. Not on the receiving end, on the wrong way. So I think that's the first one. And so the other reason I quite like it is we one of our things is we're not big fans of corporates. The corporates, by virtue of being corporates, in many cases will go into post mode around this time of year, just because of the nature of the way corporates run. Especially in the current environment, end of 2025, we've got large numbers of corporates who've, let's say, they're in cahoots with government policy in some way, shape, or form, and they're perhaps beneficiaries of certain policies. And so some of those corporates have made billing decisions which have been foisted upon GPs in there. If you wanted to go fishing for a GP, then I would be really looking at which corporates are near me. And that would certainly be one area of focus for conversations, because I suspect there'll be many GPs who've been strong-armed or cajoled into certain billing practices that aren't in keeping with who they want to be. And however much rationalization happens, there are many who, number one, their personal identity might be strongly linked to private billing, or they may be working in an environment that, whilst they're happy to bulk bill, doesn't support a sustainable way of working. And that is a perfect place to go looking at, this particular year. But that's not the only place. I would certainly be going hard with GP recruitment. Then the next one, when it comes to calling off the hunt too soon, comes around patients. Historically, January, February, March can be a bit of a quieter time. Perhaps we've got people on annual leave in January, so maybe we won't feel the drop-off in demand as much. But the reality is, especially with some of the other pressures at the moment, with the proliferation of increased number of universal bulk billing practices, with role substitution in pharmacy, there could well be a significant drop-off. We've talked about it elsewhere, about the quadruple whammy. It could be a significant drop-off in appointment demand. And so we want to make sure that we've put a floor under that by making sure that we've filled up our appointment book in advance wherever possible for January, February and beyond. And that's a really important tactic, because coming to the end of January, early February, we start thinking about cash flow, definitely with the number of public holidays, reduced doctor availability, reduced appointment demand. There's a reduction in billings. That will be exacerbated this year because of all the other parts of the quadruple whammy we've talked about. And so I think we can reasonably expect that funds will be tighter for many owners come end of January, early February. Then we get normally the BAS deadline towards the end of February, and we're waiting for incentive payments from government. The February cash crunch, many people experience that and feel that, for real.
And don't forget, Sachin, there are usually 3 pay periods in January, which is another enhancement for the owner.
Absolutely. And so, between December or January, you can have an extra pay period normally somewhere. That means you can have a fortnight extra of staff costs in a period where you've got significantly reduced revenue. And so making sure you have done this work and don't call off the hunt when it comes to filling up your appointment book will prevent some of the pain of that February cash crunch.
That's actually, this used to be one of my rules of thumb when I had a much bigger empire of practices. But between Christmas and Easter is roughly 4 months. And I used to say what happens is you get 5 months of expenses and about 3 months worth of income in that time. So you need to be not surprised by that and prepare appropriately for it, because it does seem to catch people unaware every year, even though it is entirely predictable.
100%. Completely predictable, happens most years. But when it is solved, one of my favorite conversations, one of the Project X's was around, it was mid-January, and I think we were having this conversation just somewhere, and we were talking about the cash crunch. They said, "Oh no, I'm sorted. I've got my buffers. I've got 3 months of operating income as buffers, operating expenditure, as buffers. I'm not worried at all." And they said that it's the nicest feeling I've ever had as an owner. And so that's where you can get to.
In fact, if it's the person I'm thinking of, they were excited to pay their best. They were waiting for it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. They wanted to pay it early, and that doesn't happen overnight, but that is exactly what's possible. What can happen sooner is diminishing the pain. We're talking in December. This is going to be hitting us in February. We can definitely remove some of the pain between now and February, but getting to work on this in the medium term means that next year you could have the buffers in place that would remove this concern altogether. Although you wouldn't stop calling off the hunt next year either. You would have filling your appointment book as a priority every year. So that's the second common mistake that happens when it comes to calling off the hunt. The third one in calling off the hunt is around team training. And so a lot of our teams may not have a full grasp or understanding of the business model and how general practice works. The reality is many people assume they see tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars coming in at the front, and there's a false assumption that there's a direct line from that FBOS machine to your back pocket as an owner with no interruption of any of that cash in the middle. And for many, they're oblivious. Either they weren't ever told or trained on how the practice operates, or more commonly, they've forgotten because they've got other parts of life in the way. And so when that happens, especially in the current environment, we're in a situation now where with all the November changes, what's happened is that there's a much stronger requirement for our alignment of our front desk team and our wider team with the way the practice operates. And we can't really have disruptions in that understanding because it creates confusion for patients and for doctors, creates frustration with doctors, which can affect retention of GPs. And so when there are concerns about team training, we get opportunities that just walk out of the door, often never to come back. And I've got a classic example of this. Just yesterday, Todd, I was on the phone to you, but we're going away this Christmas. And so it's 3 years since we had our typhoid vaccines. And so we're in the process of trying to arrange that. And
when you say we, you're talking 4 people.
4 people. And so finance wasn't a consideration. It was really, we need to get this sorted out. And the practice essentially put a wall down and made it, we spoke to the admin person there to try and arrange it. And they just said, we can fit you in 2 weeks or whatever it was. And that didn't work for us. And then the conversation just closed. And what that means is, and you go on the website, it doesn't clearly explain how to access this service there. Obviously, we have insider knowledge as GPs and we can pull in favors if we need to, but that wasn't my intention at all to do anything like that. And so in the end, we've ended up booking at a pharmacy. And I'm really sad about that because I wanted to support the general practice, but the person on the phone didn't have the understanding or knowledge of their processes and systems to be able to help me beyond, we can't fit you, well, we don't have an appointment. But there was no, and this isn't intended to be a criticism, it's just an area of improvement, which I think shines a light that probably is a blind spot for many practices. There's probably opportunities every day at multiple levels that we're turning away that we need to be aware of. And I think part of it is knowledge, but part of it is also related to attitude and understanding of how the business model operates. And as a practice, once you have acquired a patient, you should be looking to service as much of their needs as possible, especially when there's someone who wants to give you money.
Well, Sachin, that would have been an easy one to have, almost a nurse-only workflow that assessed everybody. You have those vaccines in your fridge ready to roll, because prescriptions for vaccines and then returning to have them administered have all sorts of problems with the safe storage of vaccines and making sure that they retain efficacy. It's much better that you receive them from the fridge into your whatever other body part you're using. But there's so many different workflows that could have been effective here. And I'll bet you in the practice, the nurse was sitting in the treatment room, probably looking for work maybe counting stock or doing something that wasn't adding value. And so, as you said, clinics are kind of oblivious to this. What did you end up doing, and how good was the service?
Well, I can't tell you how good it is because we've booked it for.
Okay, you haven't had it yet, right?
But what we did is I didn't want to find another general practice because then you have to see you have to go through a whole process. We had the prescriptions already. I actually did what I think a patient would do, which is I went on Google. Like I'm busy. We are busy at work at the moment. My wife is busy with her work. We didn't have a great deal of time to be organizing this. We'd already made 3 or 4 phone calls to our practice and a sister practice. And so got on Google, found a pharmacy 10 kilometers away, 15 kilometers away, sorry, phoned them up. They said, yep, we can do it. I said, look, we can't make it till Saturday. They just took our details, reserved the vaccines. We set a time. And then they said, oh, is this much money? I didn't even consider the financial part, to be honest. And so I think I had in my head, it will be about 130 each. They said 95 each is what it is. But I hadn't thought of that. The main objective was to get it sorted. So, but a notional figure I had in my head was 520, at least for 4 of us. It will be whatever, 380. But the main thing was actually getting it done for someone who's busy working and wanted to give custom to the regular practice that we would go to. And that again it's not a criticism. It's just that there's just an example. And I think what you just said about the nurse may have been just waiting and looking for work. My suspicion is that probably is true. And so you've got a double loss because you've got someone that's paid and employed and fully capable. At the same time, you've got a barrier at the front that is sort of repelling some of those that could use that capacity and the revenue that's there. And when people are in this environment where people are being encouraged to look for free, you've got many, many people who are already in your database who want to pay you. We need to capture that. And I think I liked, when you and I were discussing this yesterday, you do need to know what are your top 5, 6, 7, 8 service streams that people want, and then think about how you can modify those workflows to make the best use of the capacity you already have that is unused. I think that's really important. But
yeah, and comprehensive care is what general practice is all about, right? There's an opportunity there when you're in for that to say, hey, Sachin, did you know you're overdue whatever else you might need? And maybe the rest of the family are due for some care as well. So there is a big missed opportunity in connecting with your routine, your regular patient base. As you said, you tried to, and it was too hard, and it wasn't in a timely manner. You obviously need to get these things in a certain amount of time, and so there's a financial lost opportunity, there's a connection lost opportunity, capacity utilization. Most likely, the nurse was not doing other things, and so. I would say that in terms of skill equivalence, you would probably say a nurse is above a pharmacist in regard to that type of care. What's happened is you've gone for something that is accessible and available, and the business that your preferred option has missed out on that care, as well as the connection that would have provided.
Yeah, and it reflects again, right? What the evidence tells us, right? Accessibility, affability, ability. And strangely, the preference was to go to the practice. And that's the current general understanding amongst the population of where they go for their health needs. And whilst others are trying to change the narrative and push people to pharmacy, we shouldn't be trying to do that.
Yeah.
Because then we're part of the problem we say we're not happy with.
Yeah. And can I hold with that for one more second, Sachin? I want to ask you one more thing as somebody who's recently experienced that. How many times would that have to happen to you before the alternative, in this case, the pharmacy, becomes your new preferred default option?
Yeah, I think it's probably the place now that I'll look first, I think, because this is now the second time that's happened. Previous time was with flu vaccines. I think in my head, now I've just got the seed planted that I didn't know pharmacists were now. It's a trial, I think, at the moment in Victoria, but I didn't know they could give that. But now I do. And when I was looking, I saw what else they can do. I was like, oh, if it's going to be that hard, maybe, again, when you're trying to just get something organized fast, it's not the frustration for me as someone who's like a really strong advocate for general practice. Like I'm awkward. Todd, I'm like happily awkward. Like I've never bought a newspaper from a supermarket because we owned a newsagent when I grew up. Those bloody supermarkets, cut our lunch, and so I said I'm never buying a newspaper from a supermarket, and 40 years on nearly, I have not done that, and so I'm a fierce advocate for trying to stay with general practice. But what I'm saying is the way we're organizing ourselves means that we risk the very thing we don't want to happening, and we're busy. I get it. Like, it's not no one's doing it intentionally, but it just shines a light on, for me, what we need to be looking at. And that all starts with the base training and understanding of how a general practice business model operates. And the new layer on top of that is, now we've acquired a patient or a family, we want to provide as much of their healthcare and their access to services as we can, because what it means from a business perspective is, from a clinical perspective, it's better, like you've just said, right? Continuity and filling in gaps in care. But from a business perspective, you're optimizing the revenue per patient who is at your practice. And if you can do that in a way that is obviously safe, etc., all of that, but can do it in a way that maximizes the utilization of the capacity that you have, well, then that makes the best return on investment for what you have. It has to start, though, with the base training and understanding of the model. And the layer on top of that is, we need to, these are existing people, we need to understand their health needs. And even if we can't solve it that time, we need to capture that and then put it into our improvement mechanism so we can build the flows for people to stay with us. And then we need to communicate it like anything and make it so very clear that people know, if I need this thing, this is how I can get this thing from my practice.
Yeah, this is exactly right. So we need to be going for breadth and depth. And if we're doing more services with our patient cohort, we need less people to look after. So that's easier because you can be more selective about who you work with. And if we're going for breadth and depth, the pharmacists are going for breadth only. And so if you just choose to go depth and not breadth, then you're going to lose a bunch of work that is opportunities to serve your patient cohort well, because the pharmacists are going to eat your lunch. And that's only one group that will eat your lunch. So you do need to be mindful of the changes in the environment, the landscape around you. You do need to adapt accordingly. As the people in Project X, they're all on top of this, but it can be the Wild West out there if you're not paying attention.
100%. I'll just say some things for anyone listening or watching this that might be useful. We've put together a little holiday reset kit. If you want some resources for this, I'll make sure the link is in the show notes or the description for this episode, and we'll have a link to that reset kit. You can grab it. It has a whole load of useful resources to help you overcome some of what we're talking about. Back to you, Todd.
Now, you're giving away the actual resources that we give the Project X members, right?
Yes. Yeah. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
The only little asterisk here is that the content that's in our content library, you need a login to access. So if you really want access to that content, you probably need to hit up Sachin and ask about how you get into Project X. That's a separate matter, but a bunch of stuff there you will be able to get access to without those logins. So have we finished calling off the hunt too soon, Sachin? Is that done?
Second one.
There was one thing I wanted to circle back to before we go to number 3. Sorry. When you're recruiting at this time of year, my experience, you and I worked out that between the two of us, we've recruited something like 500 GPs and probably spoken to 2.5 times as many of that. My experience was that in December, January, February, so 3 months, I would think that we recruited somewhere between 50 and 60% of our GPs in those 3 months. And there were 3 things behind that. Number one, as you alluded to, there's less noise. So most other recruiters, professional recruiters, are winding down. They're having long lunches. They're on the Chardonnays. While they're on the Chardonnays, you need to be going harder. Number 2 is your audience have more time because they're actually winding down. Kids' sport is stopping, usually 2-3 weeks out from Christmas. So if you're a parent with kids that are at school age, you've probably got 10, 12, maybe 20 hours a week back. And so you can keep an eye on your social media feed, and just more time to think. And as you rightly mentioned, number 3, at the end of the year, people are naturally more reflective, and then they do start to talk to their family, their friends about the decisions they're wanting to make. And often it's like, you know what, next year is going to be different. And so I'm going to make these changes, A, B, C, D. Some of those will be around health. Some of those will be around leisure time, what they're doing with their friends and family. You can bet that there's going to be decisions made around work, what they will and won't tolerate, and the standards they aspire to working within. And so this is a really good opportunity for you to get into their feed and start talking a bit about what makes your place different. And I would say, as well as not coasting, you should accelerate. So I'm going to give an analogy which relates to one of my childhood fans. In the 80s, there was a type of rallying called Group B rally cars, and they banned these rally cars because they ended up being too fast, and there were some serious injuries. In fact, in that era, they were faster than Formula One cars, except on dirt. They were just absolutely crazy machines. And so I used to absorb all of this stuff all the time and read it and watch it on TV. And I remember reading about, there was an article on what made the better drivers better than the others. And I read this thing that said that coming to a blind crest, the best drivers used to look at the tree line. So rather than looking at the road, they're looking up and they're looking which way the tree line goes. So that not only were they not backing off coming to a crest, they actually had the car prepped and the throttle fully down, knowing which way they were going to go. And so the lesson there is that those guys, and actually they weren't all guys. Michaela Mouton was an epic driver, woman in that era, never been a female in Formula One driving, but she was killing it in that era with the best car of the era, the Audi S1 E2 Quattro, beautiful machine. If you can go and look that up, have a listen to the sound. Anyway, they would know that when other people were lifting off, that was the time to go flat out. And the difference between winning and second place was how often you could be going flat out compared to everybody else. So rather than not cruising, I want you to be like Michaela Mouton. I want you to hit the gas, even though you're going over a blind crest, and absolutely go full knacker into the next corner, because the odds are you'll probably recruit 1, 2, maybe 3 GPs using that tactic alone. All right, Sachin, that's enough from me and reminiscing about Group B Valley days in the 80s. Over to you, number 3 of our 3 biggest mistakes people make.
Yeah, this one is just failing to make our people feel valued. And so with the employed team, there's obviously, it's a good time to share gratitude there. You may give gifts, you may run an event, end of year, etc. But my favorite starts with something as simple as a handwritten note, personalized to the person and something about them. But there needs to be that expression. With the GPs, again, similar. However, we also need to have a bit of a future plan in place for those GPs. So I think it's a really good time to, if it's too late now to actually have that conversation, it's not too late to put it in the calendar for next year. And that should really be about what they want to get out of the next year, a regular coaching conversation. Project X members listening to this will have all those resources in the members area, or you can put it in the Facebook group. But actually putting in their diary from now, if you haven't already had those conversations, a conversation very early in the new year about how you want next year to look from a GP perspective, as well as making sure they're aware of how grateful you are for all their contributions to your community, will be important. Then for patients' perspective, like making sure they know they're appreciated and communicating well and regularly on a cadence with them as part of a bigger internal data, existing patient marketing and communication. It's going to be really important, especially in the new environment. Patient retention is a key, and making sure people know, just like we talked about a little bit earlier, about all the services and offerings you have, especially in this sort of moving environment where there's all these commoditized type services left, right, and center. Men's health for this website, women's health for this website. If you're going bald, go to this website. I didn't go to that website, obviously.
I did.
And one of us did, yeah. And so just really being clear with the way we educate our patients about how we can help them and the offerings that we have, because they may be looking elsewhere, assuming we can't offer those types of services. And then our partners, like those partners might be referral partners, community partnerships, etc., that are people that refer patients to you or share care of patients with you. So there may be, non-GP specialists. It might be other practices in your area, might be pharmacies, might be community health services. It might be, maternal child health nurse services. It might be religious organizations. It could be a whole variety of things.
And your actual business partners.
Yes, absolutely. And so just making sure that anyone that you're in business with knows that how grateful you are for that. And one of the things that always comes up here, Todd, is, I'm an owner, I'm giving gifts and saying thank you to everyone, but
I'm on my back.
Yeah, no one ever gives it to me. But at the end of the day, it's just part of leadership.
Do you want me to get my violin out?
You can if you want, but the reality is, it's one of the prices of leadership, and one of the qualities of a great leader. You give your gratitude without expectation, and the reality is most people aren't owners because they don't have that capacity to do that at the same level that you can as an owner. And that's, the reality is you just got to give and give thanks, give gifts, whatever it is in your environment, and give without expectation, with genuine appreciation, and just got to believe in reciprocity. The world will return something somewhere at some point. But the reality is the journey of a leader means that you are generally giving more than you are receiving.
Yeah, and I think you shouldn't infer meaning from people's inaction the other way. There's a variety of reasons why people might not reciprocate, and you don't need to get into that. You just need to make sure that you reliably deliver on your part, and that will always be appreciated, irrespective of how much people actually say it's appreciated. So, yeah, I think that can't change the action that you take.
And so there we go. They're the 3 sets of mistakes. Not preloading the following year, calling off the hunt too soon, and failing to show gratitude or failing for them to feel appreciated for the part they play in your business. Our way of showing gratitude to our listeners is, as I've said, we've put together something called the Holiday Reset Kit. We're going to put the link in the show notes for today. It's our gift to you. Lots of it will be accessible. Some of it is restricted to those who are within Project X, but you'll find it super useful nonetheless. And you can grab it by using the link in the show notes. Back to you, Todd.
And just to be clear, that's an actual gift. You don't have to sign in. You don't have to give your details. You don't have to do anything. It's just there. Click on it, take it, enjoy it. And if you get something of benefit out of it, Sachin, I'm going to ask the audience out of gratitude to share something through your Facebook or my Facebook profile, just to say what was most valuable. That's all I'd love to hear from you. If there's something awesome in there, share it with us. If you love it, share it with somebody else. If you think it's really cool, then share it far and wide, because that is part of our message. Our mission is to make practice ownership sexy again. And one of the issues that we all face in general practice ownership is that GPs do not want to be practice owners. 80% of them are hard no. Even 6 years ago, it used to be around about 45% that said, don't think so. Now it's 80% hard no. It's about 8% that say, oh, maybe, and about 12% that are like, yep, I'm in. We need the number of GPs to be more like 20 to 30% that are really keen on ownership. And so our mission is to increase that number. We fundamentally believe that general practice in Australia is the most important part of the health system. No arguments about that from us. We also fundamentally believe that general practice is best served by having doctor owners, and that will provide a much better health system for you, for me, our families, our friends, our loved ones. That is what we're all about. We do not want to see a corporatized health system. So enjoy your Christmas, New Year's, or whatever you call this time of year. May you have an awesome time. Chill. Get stuck into the Holiday Reset Kit. There's a lot of value in there. Sachin, I'm going to go to a Christmas party. How about you? What are you up to?
I'm going to go for a haircut.
On that note, let's land this baby. See you all at the next Scama Clinic podcast. Bye.
Bye-bye.